books. And after, I can make some additional, give you some additional ideas about how you be a successful entrepreneur. I must say that in the United States, every single major business school is focusing on entrepreneurship. It's one of the most popular majors, and schools, my school, Haas School of Business, prides itself on its entrepreneurship program, but so does UCLA, so does Harvard, so does Columbia. So it's a very popular topic throughout the world. Well, let me start by talking about something that's really central to entrepreneurship. You really want to not just introduce a product, but you want to introduce a game-changing subcategory. You want to somehow change what people buy. And this has been true forever. We've had hundreds and hundreds of studies that illustrate that the single best predictor of new product success or new service success, the single best predictor, and this has been proved time after time after time, is how different the product is. That's the single most important thing. And so that's what game-changing subcategories is all about, to create something that's better, that's different, and so forth. And so there's a lot of things that go into success, but this starts with that. Anyway, my idea started when I got, I've done a lot of work in Japan. I've been there many times. And I got a hold of some beer data in Japan, 35 years of it. And the interesting thing is that long time span, the market share trajectory changed only 5 times. And every single time you could explain the change by the introduction of a new subcategory. I then studied the computer industry and found the same thing, that every time there was a surge of growth, and I observed maybe a dozen of them in a period of, say, 25 years. And every single one of them involved a new subcategory: the user-friendly interface, the built-to-order PCs of Dell, the workstations of Sun, the cloud computing of Salesforce. And there was another 8 or 9 others that had the same characteristic. But, you know, pick any category: automobiles, clothing, yogurt, coffee, airlines, water. The story is the same. If you see a surge of growth, it's almost always because somebody created a whole new subcategory. And that led me to a really amazing observation. The only way to grow, and the only way to be successful as an entrepreneur, with rare exceptions, is to own a game-changing subcategories. That means transformational or substantial innovation. It means my brand is better than your brand strategies do not generate growth. And that's not the way to be an entrepreneur either. It's not the way to say, I can create a brand that's better than these brands that are already there. I'm going to have some sort of modest improvement, or I'm going to have better advertising or something. That never works. You need to own a game-changing subcategory. And we're now in the digital world. And what digital has done is to put this whole sort of phenomenon on steroids. Because now there's more subcategories being created, they grow faster, and they have a higher upside. And the reason for that is really twofold. First of all, the digital has created a lot of options. There's there's the GPS, there's the internet, there's the iPhones, there's the Internet of Things. there's big data, there's analytics. All these things has enabled new concepts and so forth to flow into the marketplace. And second, we have market access. You know, it used to be to become known, you'd have to create some advertising or do something expensive, and you'd have to create some distribution. You'd have to get a sales force, or you'd have to find retailers to sell your stuff. Now there's e-commerce. Now there's social media. Now there's internet websites. And all that means that you can get access to the market better. So how do you do that? How do you develop a game-changing subcategory? Well, there's two important things you have to do. And these are two things that every entrepreneur needs to strive for. The first of these two things is you have to develop what I call must-haves. And a must-have is something that defines the subcategory, and it represents a new or superior buying or use experience. A new or superior buying or use experience. Doesn't necessarily have to be new. It could be the same, but it has to be a lot better. Or it can create a meaningful brand relationship. So it doesn't necessarily have to be new technology that creates a new product. It could be a brand relationship that's based on shared values or shared interests or respect or admiration or something, but it has to be meaningful. Let me give you an example. Airbnb started something like 13 years ago, 2007, when two guys were sitting in a 3-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, and they didn't have enough money for their rent. But they had some air mattresses they used for camping. So they say, why don't we rent those out? Because there's a convention coming up, a design convention, that's all sold out. Can't even get a hotel room. So they went on the internet and they said, you can come to our place and we'll give you an air mattress and a room. And they got 3 people. They made, over the course of the 4-day convention, they made $1,200, and they paid their rent. This is 2007. They did the same thing then in Dallas, and then they expanded further. And today they've got 50 million guests that come each year, or at least they did last year before the pandemic. They have 6 million hosts. They have a business value of $35 billion. That's Airbnb. So what are the must-haves that Airbnb has? Let's focus on the host. Why would somebody with a room to rent, why would they come to Airbnb? Well, first of all, at Airbnb, the hosts are not owners or managers. It's not a transaction. They're entrepreneurial hosts. They're hosts because they focus in on guest satisfaction. They're entrepreneurial because they're always improving what they do, the way they interact with the guests, the way they present their property. Second, Airbnb offers support in their presentation and ideas, mentorship, online community, and annual conference. Airbnb offer experiences for that host can offer guests. Might be hiking, might be shopping, might be museums, but it's a lot different than going to a Hilton hotel. And there's reviews. You know, if you're a host and you have a fear that the guest might be disruptive or unreliable, well, there's reviews of these guests from other hosts. And if you want to know how you're going to present yourself, you know that they can look at reviews of the hosts and they can see what a great host you are. And just some observations about these must-haves. First of all, there's 4 of them, not just one. It's very hard to be entrepreneurially successful with one idea. You got to surround that with some others. And secondly, this is not all about the product, the host support, the review of guests, and so forth. It's more than that. And it's not all functional. It's a lot of this is a personality. It's an attitude, entrepreneurial host. There's some emotion behind that. It's just not facts and figures and functionality. So the second thing an entrepreneur has to worry about, and this is almost never considered, it's a branding. Branding is really important. And you want to become the exemplar brand that represents the market that you're going after and drives its visibility and its positioning. So this new subcategory you developed, it's really important that you use branding mindset, you use branding tools and ideas to represent that market and make sure that market wins, because you see, what you're going to be engaged in if you're successful is not brand competition. It's subcategory competition. And the exemplar brand has 3 jobs. Job 1 is to position the subcategory. You look at Salesforce, and they had software in the cloud. That was, they introduced that in 1999. There was no software in the cloud before Salesforce. So they had to identify and position around the must-haves, nothing to buy and maintain, continuous upgrades, it's secure, and we have a we have kind of a personality. It's not obsolete. It's cool. And so they had expressed that, and they did this in some outrageous ways. Siebel, their CRM competitor, was having a big convention, and Salesforce picketed them with some fake picketers, and they had signs that said software is obsolete. What they meant, of course, is software that's not in the cloud is obsolete. And they had fake interviewers and fake microphones, and they got a lot of publicity. And this was just one of many stunts they gave. They had their CEO, Mark Benioff, give all kinds of talks and articles and books. And actually, in 1999, during that first year, the Wall Street Journal wrote an article saying that Salesforce is taking a leadership in this new software. That was the first year. Second job is to scale. You want to build a business as fast as possible. So you have to build a customer base. You need to solidify your exemplar status. And one way to do that is to overinvest in growth. And look at Amazon did that. They didn't show any profits for 15 or 20 years. They put all their money into the infrastructure, building warehouses, building technology, building their brand. But you can also use social media. Here's a story for you. Just a few years ago, a company started selling razor blades over the internet. And they started with a video. You go to YouTube and look at that video. It's remarkable. Dollar Shave Club. They got 12,000 subscribers in 48 hours. and that started their business. They sold their company to a Unilever, or was it Nestle? I think it was the Unilever, just 4 years later for $1 billion. $1 billion in 4 years. And the key to that was this video that created 12,000 subscribers in 2 days. You couldn't do that before social media. Third, you build barriers. Now, the strength of the must-haves that come out of positioning and the base of local customers that come out of scaling are two huge barriers to competitors. But you can also brand the innovation. Uniqlo, the Japanese retailer, branded their fabrics. Heat Tech keeps in heat. Airism keeps you cool in the summer. And it's branded. They own it. Competitors that want to copy them cannot copy the brand. Then you'd have continuous innovation. Prius had for something like 15 years, no competition. And it was in part because they continually innovated. And then there's the customer experience. Amazon has such an amazing customer experience. It's not easy to compete against Amazon. Although in my book, I tell you how to do that, and some people that have done it, you can be an entrepreneur against Amazon, but one of the things that you are fighting against is their customer experience. So the only way to grow, own a game-changing subcategory. Digital puts subcategory growth on steroids, and you need become the exemplar brand to position, scale, and build barriers. So that's two of the things I would tell you as entrepreneurs you need to do. Develop must-haves that create subcategories and become the exemplar brand within those subcategories. Well, here's the third thing that you need to think of. You got to realize the importance of strategic messaging now, internally and externally. It's with all that clutter in the marketplace, it's really more and more important as ever. And the reality is that because of the clutter, because of the mess, it's so hard to break through. And that's why I start talking about the power of stories. And that's the subject of the second book. Stories do break through. But I'm not talking about just any story. I'm talking about a signature story. And that's a once upon a time account of an event or expertise. It's not facts. It's not descriptions of offerings. People aren't interested in descriptions of your offering. Second, a story breaks out of clutter and disinterest. It's got to have a wow factor. So entertaining, unusual, or informative, or with such an emotional connection, or such an intriguing plot or characters that people just have to share it. And third, it has to have or imply an authentic strategic message. Let me give you some examples. Barclays was once the least trusted bank in the least trusted industry in the UK. They developed a new purpose to help people achieve their ambitions, and their employees created programs around this. They got 4 of these programs were labeled the Digital Eagles. They were all around teaching publics how to thrive in a digital world. And they created stories around this program. One was around Steve Rich that was enjoying a sport called running soccer. No running, no contact, 6 per side, and allowed people that had injuries or were too old to engage in normal running soccer to participate. And Steve Rich needed help to raise interest, connect people with teams, organize a national tournament, and the Digital Eagles helped him do all this. And I made a video about the whole process and how much joy and rejuvenation in his life Steve Rich found. It made you cry. We showed his wife and his relationship. Now, Barclays tried everything to improve their trust factor when they were so negative. Nothing worked. But when these videos came out, they did work. 20 months in the program, trust was up 33%, 6 times what they got with advertising. Consideration was up 130%, 5 times that of advertising. And they got 5,000 positive mentions in press. Before, it had only been negative. And it was the stories that broke through. So signature stories, they gain attention. They distract from counter-arguing. When you see a story, your inclination is not to be skeptical. It's just a story. And it creates liking and feelings that are transformed to the brand. We call this affect transformation in psychology. If you like something, you're going to like things that are connected to it. And then I advise you to go to UC Health, which is a regional health care system in Colorado and in the United States. Go to YouTube, and watch some of their videos. They have some amazing videos. It doesn't talk about their hospitals or their doctors. It talks about their clients. And one of them is Becky. She was skiing with her husband and she had a heart event. She had to be airlifted to the UC Health headquarters in Boulder. And there they found her heart was sort of not functional anymore. So she sat in her hotel room, and then a doctor came in and she asked him, "Do we have a heart?" Because she needed a heart transplant. That was the only answer. And they said, "Yes, we do." And again, you can't watch this without crying. And she got surgery and she started skiing again. And the lesson of this is that an emotional connection and inspirational content can make a huge difference. Another is that the heart competence of the physicians and the hospitals at UC Health, they were not mentioned. It wasn't about them. But the viewer kind of discovers this fact by listening to the story about Becky. We went on and saw a story of another video about Becky knocking on the door of the donor's mother who lost her daughter in an automobile accident and telling her that her daughter's heart is going to live on. You can feel it in my chest, and it's going to do a lot of really good things. So if you look at Manny Rodriguez, who's the CMO of UC Health, he tells about how he did this program of story development. And his advice is stop talking about yourself. Tell stories about your client. So if you're an entrepreneur, you have a real challenge because you don't have a lot of money for brand building and telling people about your new venture. So how do you do that? Well, one way to do that is to create a story. And it can be a story that goes viral. And that's what happened at Dollar Shave Club. 12,000 new subscribers in 2 days, and they had never heard of Dollar Shave Club. But that video was so funny, so outrageous, so off the charts that it attracted all that attention and got all that exposure, went viral. So one of the advantages you have as an entrepreneur is you can be outrageous. If you're one of the big established companies, you can't do that. You can't risk alienating your existing customers that have been with you for 30 years. But if you're an entrepreneur, you can have a personality that's funny. You can have a personality that's a little bit outrageous, that's willing to take on the big guy. You're an underdog. That's an advantage. And you can use stories as a way to share those qualities about yourself. And you can exploit that kind of a situation you're in to create stories. So anyway, that's the takeaway. The stories are powerful. Facts are not. Program or descriptions of offerings are not. Stories get attention. They change perceptions. They persuade. They energize. They stimulate action. Now, to find and create and use signature stories is challenging. You're probably not. That's probably not your skill. If you're an entrepreneur, your skill is probably within the offering sort of environment. So you may have to find somebody to help you, but it's going to be quite worthwhile. So 3 tips for an entrepreneur. 1, create must-haves that define whole new subcategories. 2, become the exemplar brand that will sort of position, scale, and build barriers around this new subcategory. And 3, consider using stories. Consider being humorous. Consider being outrageous. Consider developing your own story, your founder story. That's what was done at Dollar Shave Club. Or consider using emotion by finding, if you have a client that's going to be really benefited by this and change their life, tell that story. If you have an employee that has got an inspirational story that gets your message out. But try to find a signature story. So those are 3 tips for entrepreneurs, and I'll be glad to take any questions you have about anything concerning these topics or branding or entrepreneurship or anything.
Thank you, Professor David, for the very insightful session, especially from the point of view for entrepreneurs. We really appreciate it. Dr. Shahid Qureshi, are you there? So,
Yes, Taskin, I'm there. So we can
yes,
take some questions in the chat box. Dr.
yes.
Farah Beg is there. I'd like to welcome from the Faculty of Marketing. So I would appreciate if they take the initiative, the marketing people, the IB faculty, we will give them preference. And the other people can write a question in the chat box, please. Dr. Farah, do you have any questions, sir, ma'am? Khurram Sharif Saab, Dr. Khurram from Qatar. Welcome, sir. Please go ahead. Dr. Khurram, please make him unmute.
Yes,
Dr. Khurram ji. Dr. Khurram is a professor of marketing at Qatar University
ji,
in the Middle East. And
please
he
unmute
served us a
yourself.
lot.
Dr. Khurram, please unmute yourself. I'm asking you to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Dr. Khurram, camera on kar lijiye, please.
Oh, you're mute again. I think you muted yourself. Just a second.
Taskin, are you
can
allowing
hear.
him to unmute? Yeah. Okay.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
All right. Okay, David, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
All right, David. First of all, that was a really riveting, a very eye-opening presentation. Some really snazzy ideas there. Can I just make a couple of points because you triggered a few nerves here? First of all, when you gave example of Barclays, I remember there still is another online bank, which is called First Direct. And they were perhaps the first ones to use experiential branding, experiential marketing with their customers. So they're really focused on experience management, as you very eloquently described. I remember one of their particular schemes, which was called the Buddy Scheme. And the idea there was like what you explained, what Barclays did. They basically helped their customers in big cities with anything and everything. So here, let's say you want to get married and you can't find a priest. So this guy who was Buddy, he would sort of step in to actually conduct the marriage. So this Buddy scheme created a lot of traction for First Direct. And I remember that they got a lot of customer feedback, very positive feedback, which they then turned into stories to basically sell, to create brand equity. So your example is bang on. Now, you talked about entrepreneurial personality, which was a very, very interesting idea. And that again, sort of, I remember still this guy called Sir Richard Branson. You must have sort of, you must have even met the guy. It's very possible. Now, this guy has a very outrageous, very funny personality, and he's a very different type of entrepreneur. No suits. The guy doesn't even comb his hair, but he has this really magic personality. And I've heard things about him that he's a real party animal. And, he's a very humorous, he's a very funny guy. Okay, these are my sort of observations, my comments. Now I have one question. Now, the way you have described approach to sort of branding, being emotional, I almost felt that we humans, we are not rational. We are basically, sorry to use the word, we are emotional fools. So basically don't get to our brains, but get to our hearts. What do you think about this? What is your take on this?
Well, so first of all, thank you for your comments, Karina. I think they're spot on. And I mentioned before, I was in your country once for a couple nights and really enjoyed it. I think that especially in the B2B world, and especially in high-tech world, managers have an erroneous view that their customers are rational, that their customers are going to make decisions by gather facts, putting those together facts, and then making a decision. That is just not true. They are under an illusion. Even if you're buying a Boeing aircraft that costs, I don't know, $40 million or $80 million, at the end of the day, people are using their gut feel, and they're putting aside these stacks of facts because they just need something to kind of to summarize their feeling, and the facts get them only too far. And then they say, do I trust these guys? Are they really reliable? Are they really innovative? Can they pull it off? Will they stand behind me? Do I have a relationship with them that is going to lead to trust and confidence? And you build that up in a little bit, part of it in facts, okay, but there's a lot of other things that have to go into that relationship. And a lot of that does involve an emotional component, emotional overlay. And again, Barclays tried with facts to demonstrate. We've got a new program now. We don't do this anymore. And what we did wasn't that bad in the first place. And all these facts that were compelling facts. it didn't help them at all. I mean, it's quite amazing. Not at all. Not. In fact, they made it worse sometimes because you call attention to this controversy. So that kind of makes it worse. So in psychology, there's a powerful consideration and persuasion called counter-arguing. And so the problem when you're bringing up facts, you stimulate counter-arguing. And you look at these radicals that are all over the world now, pointing out these conspiracy theories that have no basis in facts. And you can put all the facts on the table and it doesn't change it. In fact, it makes them even more convinced that their misguided position is correct. So that's one of the roles of that's why I think stories is so important. I wrote this book on storytelling, and it seems at first glance this is a tactical thing. That's sort of one of many options you can use in getting your point across. It's much more fundamental than that, and I think you're quite right.
David, very quickly, I absolutely take your point on board. I think the crunch decision has to be made. Emotions, gut feeling really jumps in. I absolutely agree with you on that one. So I think the left brain takes you so far. Yes, you can look at the data, you can look at the information, you can look at the figures. But at the end of the day, I think when you go into this land of unknown, and with most decisions you do, with most marketing decisions you do, that is where the leap of faith has to happen. That's where I think you have to let your emotions take over. First off, thank you very much for talking to me, David. If you are around our neck of the woods next time, do give me a call. I will leave my details with Dr. Shahid Qureshi. So if you are in Qatar, it would be a pleasure to go on a round of golf with you. So the invitation is there for you to take.
Oh, thank you. Well, the same is true here. If you get to San Francisco, let me know.
Okay, David, I'll take you on that. Thank you. Thank you, Taskin.
Thank you, Dr. Karam. Professor Nayyar, if you're there and if you would like to ask a question, please.
I don't have any questions in particular, but I've got some observations. But thanks to Dr. David Aaker on giving some very good insights on branding. And I feel the mantra of the success of today's brands are, it's basically it's the changing of the attitudes of how the companies look at the customer. I've just written a quote there. It doesn't really matter what you say and what you do. Ultimately, the bottom line is what matters is how you make your customers feel. So you gave an example of Amazon and their customer service. I would say that it's out of the blue if you talk to them and how they handle it. So the world is more, the business is more changing from being transactional to looking at the lifetime value of the customer. And you also talked about the emotional connection. So we have a chain of fast food restaurants here in called Chick-fil-A. So it started in North Carolina, but it's kind of getting all over the place. And then we have Apple, which, according to Simon Sinek, he's one of the contributors on marketing and business. So he says that it's for a company, it is not important what you do it. What's important is why you do it. And this is what Apple translates in their marketing campaigns. They don't really talk about their products. They talk about everything else, about what they do. So that's my comment, and And I think it was a wonderful presentation, very good insights. And I'll check out those books you have referred, and I've requested Taskeen to, if she can share the pack of slides with your permission, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Yes, feel free to use my slides and talk about my ideas. That's my goal in life, is to get my ideas spread around the world. My next book is going to be on how you use branding to help you do social programs more effectively, and it's all based on the fact that more and more companies are really focusing on a higher purpose, and especially a higher social purpose. And they want to do more than just create sales and profits. Their employees demand it. And sometimes their customers demand it. Their investors demand it. And so there's a huge effort around the world to create a higher purpose and to be in business for something that matters.
Thank you, Dr. David. There's one question from one of our MBA students, because the Aaker model is such a crucial part of marketing and branding that we do. So one of our students is asking if you would make any change to the Aaker model after so many years of exposure and experience and learning and observation. So would you propose any change to the Aaker model right now at this point in time?
Well, the basic idea of the Aaker model is that it's not a three-word phrase. A brand is not a three-word phrase. A brand is multidimensional. It's got 5 dimensions, 8 dimensions, 12 dimensions. That's one thing. Second, those dimensions are not pre-specified. Every brand does not need to have a personality. Every brand does not have to have organizational values. Every brand does not even have to have a technical, functional product breakthrough. And so you don't pre-specify your dimensions. There's no check-off list. What you do is you ask yourself, what do you want your brand to stand for? And whatever works for you in that context, that's the dimensions you use. And the third thing is you prioritize those dimensions. And you have some that are more important than others, and you adapt those dimensions to different markets and contexts. Those fundamentals have not changed. When I when I introduced the model in a book called Building Strong Brands, I did not even have a central idea. I was so opposed to the three-word phrase that I wanted to have a brand represented only by multiple dimensions. In the brand leadership book, we discovered in working with it that some of the time a central idea helps. So we added to that an optional brand essence. So that represented a change to the model. And in my last book, Aaker on Branding, where I kind of summarized a lot of my early, the 5 or 6 books that came before that, Aaker on Branding is a red book. Let me see if. It's this book here. In that book, I actually changed the name of the model from a brand identity model to brand vision model, because identity was a little bit, it meant to some people just a logo, visual stuff. So I changed the name to brand vision, but that's probably nobody even noticed that change. And it's quite minor because it doesn't change any of the fundamental aspects of the model that I mentioned.
All right. So we have one other question. It is how to bring creativity in signature stories versus facts to retain donors for nonprofits. So the oxytocin rush can happen once, but what about the next one and the next one and the following ones?
Testine, I couldn't understand what you started in your first sentence. That was some word I did not get.
All right. So it's more about how do you bring in creativity to signature stories? And because you also need to give out facts to retain donors, especially when you're talking for
Wait,
nonprofit.
I got the creativity this time. What was the next point?
It's how to bring creativity in
Yeah,
signature stories
I got that.
versus versus facts to retain donors for nonprofits. Because
To,
the oxytocin,
to retain donors?
yeah, to retain donors for nonprofit organizations.
Well, that's a second question, huh?
Yeah, that's a separate question. This is a separate question.
Okay. Well, so the question is, how do you find stories? And that's a really good one because, um, and incidentally, nonprofits are especially uh, should look towards stories to give their message because nonprofits have stories. Almost all of them have just great stories. You look at the site Charity Water, for example, and look at their stories. They're just terrific. So if you're a nonprofit, it's it's almost inexcusable not to find stories. But for most people, it's tough to find really good stories. So where do you look? You can look at a founder story. A lot of times that's inspirational and helps you communicate strategically. Look at your employees. Look at your customers. Look at your product and its application. And a lot of the really great stories come out of one of those four places. Creativity is just about um, you know, creativity is about looking at different places for ideas. That's sort of the essence of creativity. So, uh, anyway, the basic idea of striving to find good stories and to invest in that is is really the lesson. And it's not a matter of being creative and not creative. In fact, um, creativity is more a process than it is an individual skill in the first place. Now, for nonprofits, as I said, nonprofits is sort of the place where stories absolutely, because usually nonprofits don't have a big budget to communicate, and nonprofits have great stories, so they should be the ones that for sure use stories. And donors are not going to be impressed with facts and descriptions of programs. I mean, they get tired of that real fast. And if you want to keep donors involved, find good stories. That would be my answer.
On that note, a faculty from our university is asking what to do if you do not have an interesting story and if you do not have a lot of subcategories to explore.
Um, well, if you don't have interesting stories, you have to look harder because there are stories. You're going to have students out there who you've changed their life. You've created things, and they will tell you that their life was changed because of a teacher or a book or an experience at your school. And if you don't have stories, you haven't been talking to your alumni because they're out there. What was the other part of the question?
If you do not have a lot of subcategories,
Oh, subcategories. Well, so what you want to do is to search for must-haves. And And again, you find those by, one way to find them is to look at the students and the alumni and find out what were their frustrations and so on. Look around the world at schools that have done it right. Now, I've taught at the Haas School, and I've worked with the Haas School to develop their brand vision, and they have, we worked at. It took us 3 or 4 years to get it right, but they have a fantastic brand vision. And one of the elements of the brand vision that incidentally started off not as one of the top 4, but as one of the second level pillars of the brand, but it elevated itself into the top 4, and it turned out to be one of the most differentiating must-haves of any business school in the world. And Haas Business School has been elevated because of it. And if Haas School can do it, you can do it. But the brand quality is based on honesty and authentic truth. This is what that school is about. And it's about it's confidence without attitude. Confidence without attitude. They make students that apply to the school write an essay. How are you exhibiting confidence without attitude? Is that really you? They now have, they say you could be the best student in the world, but if that's not you, don't come here. They do that to professors as well. And you talk about interest in employers. When they hear there's a school that has students that have confidence without that, they are so sick of going to Harvard, going to Wharton, going to Chicago, going to Stanford, and all those students have a lot of attitude. They think they're big stuff. They think they're going to step into CEO jobs. But at Berkeley Haas, it's not that way. They have confidence, all right, but they don't have that attitude. They really don't. And that has made a huge difference in the number and interest in employers to recruit. It's made an interest in students that want to come to a place where other students are like that. It makes an interest of professors that are attracted to school like that. And if Berkeley Haas can do it, I think your school could do it too.